Please listen carefully.
Welcome back to another episode of the Extra Buttery Podcast. We've got quite an episode for you ahead of us today with some wrap-up of Game of Thrones Season 7, looking ahead to Season 8, and then we'll dive into the HELLBOY whitewashing incident that's been playing out over the past couple of days. And then we'll talk a little bit about, also in the comic book world, the Joker movies that are being pitched for the DC universe, and the kind of strange casting situation around that, and how it's making fans of the DC universe more than a little confused. And then we'll talk about another controversy in the movie world right now, which is the newly announced remake of Lord of the Flies, but with an all-female cast, which is pressing a few buttons with people online. So we'll take a look at that. And then we'll close things out with some discussion of Steven Soderbergh's new film, Logan Lucky, which Jason got to see recently. I also saw it a little while ago, so we'll close things out with some review and discussion of that. But coming to you from Toronto, my name is Robert Snow, and joining me from Vancouver is my co-host Jason Chen. How's it going?
Good.
Just good?
Back to my usual answer. Yeah.
Back to you.
Just
Okay.
good. It's super hot out here, man.
Is it? It's like really cold here.
We're getting like smoke, wildfire smoke from like the States, from California.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
A couple weeks ago, we had the ones from like the interior BC coming down to Metro Vancouver. But now this is like the US revenge, where their smoke is moving up north to us.
So it's all very post-apocalyptic.
Not quite, but it's definitely very hot.
Or just kind of generally like, hot and hazy.
It's
kind
very
of
hazy.
Not fun weather.
Very hazy.
Gross. Well, keeping things in a sort of like maybe a disastery kind of mood, we've got Game of Thrones, which just clued up its 7th season. I know.
Was it really a disaster though?
Well, I'm just thinking of like the big scene at the end, you know, the cliffhanger before the credits, you know, that.
Oh, okay, yes. A disaster for the free folk, yes.
Yes, disaster for the free folk, maybe for all of Westeros, but in terms of like overall production quality and everything, a lot of people were saying that that one finale episode did a lot to kind of redeem some of the more irritating things in the previous episodes. Which I kind of agree with. You know, there wasn't a whole lot that was kind of surprising there, but I mean, I was like, okay, cool. That's a good setup for the final season.
I would say it's not surprising because Game of Thrones is starting to become your cookie cutter fantasy epic, because it's starting to become a good versus evil battle, because all the politics is almost done with, right? Like the only real political player is Cersei.
Pretty much.
Everyone else has kind of tossed it by the side. But did you have an issue with the time travel of characters in this show, as a lot of people did?
Part of me says yes, because I know that there is a lot of value in how much time was devoted to the literal like travel time in the show, and how, you know, that's always been a big part of the books and a big part of the TV show, you know, just kind of getting a sense of the actual scale that we're dealing with, and the fact that, hey, you know, modern transportation really doesn't exist here. It's going to take them weeks and weeks and weeks to get from one big important place to another big important place.
Not to mention they always get sidetracked, right?
Yeah, and there's always like tangents and stuff, and so, you know, in previous seasons it felt like we wouldn't get the really big narrative plot engine type moments until, you know, the classic kind of second last episode of the season moment. But now we're getting those at a much faster rhythm, you know, and as a result, they're kind of moving people all around the map, and you're getting back into more of like it feels a bit more like a movies kind of sense of scale as opposed to a TV show.
I feel like this time travel thing is almost specific to this show, because in previous seasons they spent so much time fleshing out, you know, subplots and individual characters. And now that everything's coming to a head, they really needed to get a move on. At the same time, I thought the editing could have been done better. When you remember that scene, that part where the Fellowship of Westeros...
The Fellowship of Westeros.
Yeah. And there's this part where like they kind of like pair off as they're walking, and they each have their own little conversations, and they kind of rehash past events.
Yeah,
So I feel like that extended scene could have been split up into separate scenes interspersed throughout the episode so that you can get a better feel of the passage of time rather than having all the conversations
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
place all at once, which makes no sense. And also the fact that when they're stuck on that island in the middle of the lake, I thought that they should have had some night scenes, or they should have shown the passage of time in some way or form so that it's not entirely implausible. Because even though the characters traveled very fast, that's partly because the episodes and the editing makes it feel like they travel very fast.
Yeah, yeah.
When in reality, like, these characters have probably, like, the season probably takes place over a period of, I don't know, 6 months or a year or something.
Yeah, it would have to. You know, certainly the number of boat voyages that we see, like, with the characters south of the wall, or even like, you know, even the way that episode Beyond the Wall kind of set up the idea of they walk a really long way to find a white, and they have all those conversations on the way, so assumedly it takes like the better part of a whole day. But then when they get in trouble, Gendry is able to run back and send a raven, you know. And this has totally been hashed over by like all sorts of people online, so it's not a new thing, but I guess
two simple solutions to that problem though. First of all, if you're going out for this expedition, wouldn't you just like carry a raven with you just in case you needed to send a message really fast?
Oh yeah, I guess.
Like instead of having someone to run all
because
the way,
they did have I love how they had the red shirt wildlings who were the red shirt free folk who seem to be always on hand to do something, like either be the latest victim of a white or to be the victim of the zombie polar bear. So like I could almost see like a wildling whose only job it was to have like bird cages on his back and
just carry a raven with you. Like, how hard can it be? The second is like, you can't tell me that they didn't bring food with them on this trip.
Yeah.
Right? Like they would have brought lembas bread or something.
whatever the Westeros version of that is.
Yeah, just like beef jerky or whatever. Like, bring it with you and show them eating it and having conversation at the same time, so you can knock down two birds with one stone. You can show the passage of time and have Jon Snow or whatever have all these conversations. And same with Benjen Stark. Like, I hate the fact that he appears out of nowhere. Why couldn't he just have joined them once they crossed the wall and have him become part of the party, and then have him be the only one stay behind and save Jon Snow's ass?
Yeah, I don't know.
Why does he have to appear out of nowhere? That I don't get.
Yeah, Benjen for the past little while has always been the show's, he's sort of been the last trump card that they had in their back pocket. Like, if they'd written themselves into a corner and there was no conceivable way for the character to get out of something on their own, they were like, oh, we still have Benjen, who is apparently like omniscient and knows when there's somebody in peril and just appears at the exact right time. But they have used that for trump card finally now. So like, you know, he dies at the hand of the whites in the end of that episode. So I guess like no more Benjen.
And I feel like Benjen would have had a really, really interesting conversation with Jon Snow, and we were totally robbed of that. Like, Game of Thrones had made a name for itself for its like sex position, and that's kind of gone out the window. And now we just have characters walking and talking like it's the West Wing. And I feel like it's such a cop-out, you know? Yeah. Like, you could have so many interesting conversations this season, but instead you just chose to like speed everything up and gloss over certain things. And meanwhile, I don't actually think you need to see Jon Snow or Daenerys every single episode. I think it cost them a very interesting Arya and Sansa Stark.
They definitely made cuts to the Arya Sansa thing, which I think left fans feeling kind of annoyed with the way it played out, because obviously it reaches like a viscerally satisfying kind of point in the finale where, you know, they finally get rid of Littlefinger. But apparently there was a really important scene there that had to be cut for time that went a long way towards kind of giving some clarity to what exactly Arya and Sansa's relationship was. Like, I saw one theory that suggested
I hope they bring it back.
Yeah, I guess so. But I saw one theory that suggested like Arya had this like elaborate plot, and Sansa was in on it, and they were deliberately saying things knowing that Littlefinger was watching them, which turned out not to be the case. They were like, the way I read it was they were legitimately annoyed with each other and one of them wanted to kill the other, and then they decided not to and flipped the tables on Littlefinger.
Yeah, we were robbed of a pivotal scene where Sansa and Arya and potentially Bran work together, because we haven't had a very satisfying, I think, reunion scene between the Stark children and have them work together. Part of the reason I don't think this season was particularly strong is because they didn't allow the characters to breathe. There was no nuance in the season. And I understand why they had to speed everything up, but I hope that in the next season that they kill off whoever they need to kill off in the first couple episodes. And then so they can really kind of flesh out everything else, the characters, and bring everyone to an end that is fitting of their character. We've invested like 10 years in this show by the time like it finishes.
What might be a cool way for them to do it would be like maybe people assume that the way season 8's going to play out is that they're going to build and build and build again until they get to a big conclusion with the Night King again in the end of the season. But I would almost prefer them to do something different where they get rid of the Night King closer to the middle of the season, and then they have like 2 or 3 episodes at the the 2 or 3 final episodes of the entire series where they can get back into the politicking of the stuff that drew people into the universe way back in the beginning. So we could kind of see them being like, okay, we've gotten rid of this existential threat, but now we're just simple humans with greedy human impulses that we have to sort out and like build a whole new kingdom around, assumedly Daenerys's rule. And then all the politics come like flooding back in. That could be a really satisfying way to kind of close things out, and it would be true to the spirit of the show, I think.
Here's my question then. Between Cersei, Euron, and the Night King, which of those dies first?
What do I think will happen, or what would I like to happen?
What do you think will happen?
My gut reaction is it'll be like a very basic like Euron, Cersei, Night King, but
I don't think that's the case either. I think Euron's going to be the last to go. I think the ultimate villain is going to be Euron Greyjoy.
Oh, you think? Huh. Okay.
Yeah, I think the Night King's going to die first, and then Cersei, or maybe at the same time, and then the last evil character is Euron. Because reading between the lines, I don't think you can have Euron play such a big role but have so little screen time. Like, he's going to be the king, or he wants to. He's coming back with the Golden Company, which is apparently like the biggest army anyone has ever seen. And so I think it wouldn't do his character justice or his storyline any justice to have him come back with the Golden Company and then have him get killed off in the first couple episodes.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense, but
if anything, I think Cersei dies first.
But then how does Euron take the money that he needs to pay for the Golden Company? Like, isn't that a Lannister deal with the Iron Bank?
Well, he's going to die after Cersei, right? He's going to die after Cersei, and he's going to be king before that.
Yeah, but so you're suggesting that like he would have married Cersei by that point?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So he would have been king by that point. Yeah, he would be the king that succeeds Cersei.
Well, I mean, everything I've heard about Euron's character, and we talked about this in the last episode, I think, like everything I've heard about Euron's character in the book suggests that he's definitely a bigger villain than he's been presented on the show so far. So I guess that would make sense. Yeah,
I'm with you. Like, if the final boss is the Night King and it's a Jon Snow versus Night King kind of ordeal, I feel like it's not very Game of Thronesy. It just doesn't feel like it's a fantasy that would play out that way, even though a lot of things about this season reflects a very good versus evil type fantasy.
I think the satisfying ending, or the ending that is closest to why people love the show, is something that closes out with like the basic human characters and kind of, that concept of like ending with the beginning and kind of circling back around and saying like, this is what the show has been about the whole time, and the supernatural stuff was kind of like the gooey center.
Oh, and also we got to see, well, we didn't get to see the Night of the Laughing Tree, but we did get another flashback.
We did, yeah. It was only a quick one, but yeah, they basically,
Which is too bad. It should have been longer.
I mean, and I guess there's still a chance for them to do it, but I don't think that it would have the same clout now that we've seen the actual wedding between Rhaegar and Lyanna.
No, and I kind of hated how they handled that scene because it didn't have as much weight as it should have. Like, we know Jon is Lyanna's son. That was a good reveal when they did it last year, right?
Yeah.
But the wedding scene and the confirmation that he's a Targaryen, I feel like if you didn't watch the show, you wouldn't know that was a pivotal moment. And maybe that was just a payoff scene for fans of the show.
Yeah. Season 7 was very much about those payoff moments. It was kind of coasting on those to an extent. But it looks like we're going to have to wait a while for season 8. Like, it's going to be apparently a 16-month.
2019. Oh my God. But what are you looking forward to it?
I mean, I just kind of, what we were just talking about, essentially. Like, I would like to see a slower kind of come down from where we've been, because I think that's what the core of a fantasy thing. Like, it's one thing to have a great big battle, but if you kind of rush through a denouement or a resolution in the final, I don't know, half hour of the absolute final episode, that would not be all that satisfying, I don't think.
But any storylines in particular that you're looking forward to?
I kind of like to see what the end game is for Bran, because he's suggested to have all this power, but, we haven't...
Well, there's the theory that he's the Night King.
Oh. He's going to be the next Night King?
He either is going to be the next Night King or he is the Night King.
Oh, okay. But how does that work? Because, like, the Night King and him are, like, two separate figures.
Right. Remember the episode where he travels back in time and ruins Hodor?
Yep.
Okay, so the belief is that Bran the Builder, so his uncle, the guy who built the wall, had the same powers and apparently went back in time to, I guess, prevent the whole war. And somehow he either wargs into the Night King or something like that, and he ends up staying there.
Oh, okay.
Like, it's a fan theory or, like, part of the books that I don't really get. But either way, there's a theory that this is kind of like the same event that's played out over and over again, and each time they travel back in time, the consequences are different, but the result is the same kind of deal, something like that.
That would be an interesting way to go, but it feels a little bit too, like, hard sci-fi for Game of Thrones. Like,
whenever you introduce time travel, it's a headache.
It's bound to alienate a big portion of the audience who, they just don't have the patience to sort out what exactly they've been shown and what it means. Like, that's partially what hurt Lost when it was coming to an end. Like, there had been so many different flashbacks, flash forwards, alternate timelines. And so when they kind of got to the final season and they were like, oh my God, we have to actually end this thing, a lot of the threads kind of got away from the writers, and now nobody can really agree on what the finale episode actually means for them. And
also because the rules of time travel are never strict.
Exactly. Yeah. It's such a hard thing to even talk about, let alone depict with, like, the rules of filmmaking. So,
right.
Yeah. I kind of hope they don't go that direction, just because it would get so thorny, and I think it would leave a bad taste in people's mouths.
Yeah, I'm kind of of that mind too. I know that Game of Thrones isn't into happy endings, but I do want a ending where, like, the evil is gone. Who do you have dying? I have, like, almost everyone dying. I think Jon and Dany are gonna die. I think Grey Worm's gonna die. I think Jaime and Cersei are gonna die. I think Euron's definitely gonna die. I think the Hound and the Mountain are both gonna die.
I could see Arya surviving, because that's kind of built into her character.
Yeah, I think she'll survive.
I could see Sansa will survive and, like, be the new face of Winterfell. I don't know if Dany will die, but I could see her, like, maybe having a child by Jon and then feeling really weird about it, and then, like, I don't know, screwing off.
But it's part of their, like, family history. Like, incest is very much accepted in the Targaryen family.
Yeah, but that, like, psychologically, it's probably gonna, like, screw her up pretty heavily. And the
one thing I don't want is when Jon finds out that he's a Targaryen to not brood on this thing. Like, you can't brood on this for 2 episodes before telling Danny that you guys are related. Like, the moment you know, you should probably tell her.
But, like, what if he doesn't find out before her? Like, what if it just happens that Danny is told before him?
Either way, like, they shouldn't hesitate. Like, I don't want this, like, relationship thing, this misunderstanding to be a plot on the show, because it just shouldn't be. Like, that's a Grey's Anatomy type conflict that we just don't need.
Yeah, it would be a bit of a soap opera kind of distraction.
I know, exactly. And, like, I don't think Jon Snow can get pouty enough, because I'm at the point where I'm kind of sick of seeing his sad puppy face where I'm just like, dude, just smile, please. Or, like, don't think life is all crap. You've got a lot of things going for you. Stop with the moodiness.
Yeah, I mean, he's king in the north, and he may get to ride his own dragon in the next season. But changing streams, let's talk about the Defenders, because the show dropped, what was it, like 2 weeks ago now on Netflix? They did their customary upload the whole season. I've watched through the whole thing. I know
I've watched half.
Yeah, you're about halfway through. So, like, based on what you've seen so far, what's your take on it?
I still hate Iron Fist. I still hate him so much.
That scene was it the 3rd episode, like, where they're all together and he comes in and he, like, talks to that the boardroom scene? That was insufferable. I was like, what is wrong with you? How do the writers conceive that dialogue and then they think to themselves, this is not abrasive, or this is not, like, this is him, this is a good move for him to make? Like, I can't understand why he's such an idiot.
Like, if you ask me to describe Iron Fist, like the character, other than his glowing fist, I couldn't really tell you anything else about him. Like, he's so malleable and fluid.
He's just such a child. Like, I get the whole idea that he was raised in like weird circumstances in a monastery and trained to be like a living weapon and all that, but none of that explains why he acts like a petulant child when he's not getting his way.
Which is totally, like, unmonk-like. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's never calm. So I don't get it.
There's a moment where, I don't know if you're at this episode yet, but they capture a member of the Hand and they take him back to their hideout.
Oh, that's the next episode for me.
Okay. So this isn't a huge spoiler, but essentially they're discussing what they should do next.
Right.
And they're talking about how the Hand has some sort of, like, door underneath New York. And that's, like, the big goal of the Hand this whole time, is to capture the Iron Fist alive and to use him as a key to open this door. And Danny Rand in this scene rejects this possibility from moment one. He's like, no, I'm a living weapon. It's impossible. Why would my hand be a key? And I'm like, but you live in,
like, HELLBOY?
Well, yeah, but like, but why is he rejecting this concept out of hand? It's not like, pun not intended, but like, why is he rejecting it like this? I mean, like, conceivably, he doesn't know everything about every possible permutation of his powers or the powers of other people. Like, isn't there like a slight possibility that the Hand knows something that he doesn't?
Also, didn't he fight a dragon?
Yeah, I don't know. So
see, like, I don't get his character. Like, he's not. I can't describe his personality to you like I can with Luke Cage or Jessica Jones or even Matt Murdock. I think Matt Murdock's actually the most fleshed out character and the most interesting. But other than Iron Fist, I actually enjoy the Defenders. I think Sigourney Weaver is a great choice as a villain.
I'm not with you on that.
No, you don't think so?
I mean,
I do like the fact that they included a bunch of Asian actors and make them speak their native language.
Yes, that's good.
I do appreciate that for sure. I think the action is all right. I'm not a huge fan of Elektra.
No, neither am I.
But overall, like, I think it's a very watchable show. I haven't finished it because I find it a hard show to binge watch.
Yeah.
I watched 2 or 3 and I'm done. It's not like Daredevil where I blitzed through the season in like 8 hours or whatever it was, where like I could sit down and watch it like through and from beginning to end without pausing. But the story itself for sure is a lot more interesting.
I don't know though, like going back to Sigourney Weaver as the villain though, like I'm still not convinced that she's a very effective villain. I like her performance and like,
yeah, her performance is good. Yeah.
It's cool that they got someone with Sigourney Weaver's like star power. All of that is fine. But for me, I wanted at least something to prove why she's the leader or why she's so feared.
Okay.
And the show doesn't really do that. And this, like, I'm not gonna tell you where they're going with that, but for me, I think back to when Wilson Fisk is introduced in Daredevil, and one of the most defining things about Fisk is when he like beats a guy with a door in his car until his head crushes in.
Yeah.
Right? And like for me, that's like an image like you're like, okay, this guy means business. He's not just some shadowy power broker. Like he's willing to get his hands dirty in a really brutal way. And that defines the character. But for me, Sigourney Weaver, in much of The Defenders, she's just kind of gliding in and out of scenes, you know, commanding a certain amount of respect and like proving that she's like very, very old. You know, she's got that ability to cheat death like a lot of the villains in this universe. But other than that, I'm like, okay, I don't, you know,
okay,
give me some proof.
Fair enough. Okay, yeah, I accept that. Because for most of the show, she kind of just like orders Elektra around. Yeah, and I'm like, what, like, even just give me like one flashback or like have her like, I don't know, execute a goon or something. Like she has Elektra execute some goons in a training montage, but I'm like, well, I don't care about that. Like that was Elektra doing that. I definitely do like the political aspects of the Hand.
Yeah, the kind of how interconnected they are with global finance and all that.
Well, that and also just the infighting between the characters of the Hand, the villains of the Hand.
The fingers, yeah.
Yeah, so to show that like the villains go through kind of the same issues as the good guys, where their plans aren't going the way they want them to, and they have to figure out what their next plan is and who the leader is. And
yeah, but for me, I think a lot of the best of there was coming from the actress who plays Gao.
Yeah, the Chinese lady. She was good in Daredevil too.
She was, yeah, and she pops up in Iron Fist. She's one of the main villains there. But I think for me, a lot of that came from her, because I know, going back to like the Weaver thing, like I know that Gao is a formidable villain because we've seen her do things in other, you know, we've seen her taking an active role in the crimes that the organization does.
Wai Ching Ho, that's her name.
Wai Ching Ho. Okay.
Oh, I thought we should have looked her up. She deserves that.
Yeah. Rather than just being that elderly Chinese actress.
Yeah. The one big opportunity, like going back to Iron Fist, because I just can't get over how poorly written this character is. Do you remember in the early part of the show where they kind of hide out in that Chinese restaurant?
Yep.
And he shows no restraint at all whatsoever when it comes to the food.
Yeah, he's just like stuffing his face, and he...
Yeah. Kind of like a kid. And I always thought that if he was trained in like the martial arts in this like super secret monk temple, and he has this love of food, wouldn't it be a really interesting character development to have him be a really stiff character, like really by the book, until he gets into the restaurant and sees the food, and then he just like goes crazy?
Yeah.
I think it would have been really funny.
That could have been good, yeah.
Yeah, to show that obviously like he has his training, but this is also the Danny Rand that everyone remembers, who's just a kid, because that juxtaposition is never there.
It's either never there, or it's never distinct enough, because he's got too many examples of him being childlike. You know, he throws tantrums, and he flies into rages, and you know, he's sloppy at fighting. You know, he always assumes that he's gonna win the fight because he's got the Iron Fist, but he doesn't actually. He gets his ass kicked more often than not.
Yeah, in one scene, he's like quoting stuff from monks he's learned from, and the next scene, he's like psycho 20-year-old millennial.
He's like every 50-something journalist's worst nightmare. He's like a walking think piece about millennials killing things.
Or, yeah, I guess. I hate that word anyway, millennial.
Yeah, it's kind of done to death.
Yeah, every article that tries to, like, make sense of our generation, I think is just a bunch of crap.
Well, I mean, and they're never written by any of us. You know, it's always written by some long-term columnist at the paper who has noticed something about the world that, you know, those youngins are fouling up.
Did you read that Detroit Free Press piece from Mitch Albom? The guy who wrote But the 7 People You Meet in Heaven. Anyway, he wrote this piece because his daughter or his son is going to college, and it was a column think piece about how college is different back in his day and today, and he makes fun of all like the safe places about like no one can swear and offend people.
Oh yeah.
Or all the liberal arts classes that they can take, or like the Shakespeare plays they don't have to read because Shakespeare was some sort of like evil person or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, like it was a really controversial piece, and I thought it was a much ado over nothing. I actually thought the piece was hilarious, but a lot of people obviously didn't appreciate it, and they're up in arms going like, you know, the usual stupid thin skin shit that people get pissed off over, you know.
I'll have to check that out then.
Yeah, check it out. I hope it's still up there, but it's really funny.
In the same realm as think pieces and readers with thin skins, that seems like a good way to get into this Hellboy whitewashing story.
My God.
Because this is really set off like a bit of a firestorm.
Okay, you tell the story, Rob.
I've been keeping an eye on it naturally because I'm a huge fan of Hellboy. I own like I would say like the first 2/3 of the comics.
I had no idea. I thought you were just a big Del Toro fan. That's why you liked it.
No, it's like I love the comics. I haven't read like the final few collections that kind of close out Hellboy's story that Mignola published a few years back. But you know, I'm deep into that universe. Like I know all the lore, and obviously the Del Toro films. Like I 100% love those.
Wait, there's a clear ending to the Hellboy story?
Yeah, I think like Mignola essentially said he was like, I'm going to bring the Hellboy story to an end. I'm going to make him into the Beast of the Apocalypse.
How closely do the first 2 films with Del Toro follow the comic book?
Not closely at all.
Oh, really? And why do you like the comic book?
I love the comics for presenting a hero who's kind of like a working class kind of guy who Mignola often said that he modeled a lot of the personality traits of Hellboy on his father, who was like a blue collar cabinet maker.
Right.
And, you know, he's got this world weariness and this sense of like, you know, very little can hurt him. You know, he gets stabbed through the chest multiple times. He loses almost all of his blood to like various monsters, but he just picks himself up and cracks a one-liner and moves on with his day.
Yeah, cracks a beer, smokes a cigar, moves on.
Yeah, and beyond that, like the artwork that Mignola does and some of the artists that he worked with in the later runs, different. It's different. You know, he's got this way of like using these beautiful kind of inset images that don't advance the plot, but they really set the environment that the scene is taking place in this beautiful way. You know, there's little like stone relief faces in like old churchyards and things like that. That there's very cinematic quality, and that was probably partially what drew Del Toro to it when he was going to adapt it. So all of this to say that I've been keeping a close eye on this Hellboy remake that's being directed by Neil Marshall, and they've cast David Harbour from Stranger Things as Hellboy.
I actually like that.
Yeah, and this movie's going to be called Hellboy: Rise of the Blood Queen. And I'm pretty sure the Blood Queen is like the villain in the piece. She's going to be played by Mia Jovovich. You know, she's a good fit for this kind of gothic horror kind of thing, so she ought to do a pretty solid job with that.
She's finally moved on from Resident Evil, huh?
Apparently, yeah, at least until...
They need to reboot. If any franchise needs rebooting, it's Resident Evil.
Oh, it's being done for sure. Maybe not with Mia Jovovich, but it's gonna... Yeah, that's happening.
But it can't be a zombie action flick. It needs to be a straight-up horror flick.
Oh, they should bring you on to to write the piece.
Hey, I'll do it. But anyway, okay, back on topic. Who was Ed Skrein supposed to play?
So Ed Skrein was cast. Now, Ed Skrein comes from Deadpool. Like, most people would probably know him as the villain from Deadpool. And he was cast to play a character named Captain Ben Daimio, or Daimio, I think it is. And Ben Daimio comes up. He was an addition to the Hellboy roster kind of midway through, I think. He came up in one of the later collections. And he's essentially a U.S. Special Forces guy who is added to Hellboy's top secret Department of Paranormal Research and Defense, the BPRD. Initially, it seems like he's just being added because he's just a really good military man and he would be a good contact to have in the field. But then it's revealed that he's actually been cursed with this Amazonian jaguar spirit.
Okay.
So he has this, I can't remember exactly what happens to activate it. I don't know if it's like a monthly thing, like a werewolf or something, but it's essentially the same idea. Like he'll transform into this jaguar monster and
it's like a jaguar PMS thing.
It's a strange variation on that. But Yeah, he'll kind of lose himself in this animal form, and then Hellboy has to kind of rein him in. So Ed Skrein is obviously like, he's a white English actor, and a lot of people who were familiar with the character, they were excited, first of all, that Ben Daimio is going to be in this movie at all, because he was always, I definitely wouldn't call him like a top tier secondary character in the universe. Like he's definitely one of the less well known ones. So they were going to put him in there, but he's supposed to be Japanese American. So when they cast Ed Skrein, people were like, oh, well, here comes Hollywood just picking up, Ed Skrein's career's on the rise. So here he comes, going to take this role. Another person of color role is being taken by a white actor. And then, to Ed Skrein's credit, I would say, he decided that he was going to step down from the role. And he wrote what I thought was a very articulate letter and posted it on Twitter, essentially saying that, he recognizes the issue with people of color and certainly Asian Americans having trouble finding roles in these big blockbusters. And for him to kind of press on in the role was doing a disservice to the character, and it wasn't helping the overall situation with the industry.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So props to Ed Skrein, because I did read the letter and it's very well thought out. I don't think the issue is about Ed Skrein. It's more about the production choosing to cast him.
Like, naturally, he was like, as a working guy who needs a job,
Yeah. Well, he didn't even know, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, he wasn't familiar with the comics. So, he was offered the role and he screen tested for it and they chose him, and then he was going to go ahead and shoot it. But then, everyone found out. So, yeah, the fault was probably with the producers. And now, of course, they've written a statement to say that, like, that was never their intention, blah, blah, blah. I think where the firestorm really got kicked up was people saying that it was basically political correctness at its worst form in the industry, like an actor who was chosen for aesthetic reasons, like the filmmakers obviously picked him for a reason, and they should have the freedom to cast whoever they want. And I don't know, it was a kind of a tortured, argument that didn't have a lot of awareness of what was really happening with people of color in the industry and the trouble of finding roles. So it was, yeah. And so Ed Skrein tried his best to kind of clear it up, but then it kind of ballooned into this political correctness argument where there is no winners.
Right. I don't blame Ed Skrein for any of this. I think this issue is not about him at all. I think it's about equality, obviously, but at the same time, if you're going to be up in arms about a white person taking an Asian role, then what about the black people or people of color or Asian people who take white roles? Like, would the argument be the same if you're all about equality?
Yeah. And that's kind of the weird wrinkle in this whole thing, is that in this movie, Hellboy Rise of the Blood Queen, I think it's the female lead is Alice Monaghan is the character's name. And in the comics, she's presented as being a redheaded Irish girl who Hellboy saves in an earlier adventure. And now in this film adaptation, we're going to encounter her as like a 20-something, but she's being played by a black actress in the film.
Right.
So now people are like, that just kind of feeds the whole thing, because you've got actually a counter example of a person of color taking a role from the comics that was presented as white. And people are like, well, does that cancel it out then? Or what's like, where do we stand with all this?
Yeah, the issue with this is like, yes, the minorities have always been underrepresented in Hollywood. But on the flip side of the coin is like, at what point do you say sorry? Like, at what point is like an apology not enough? You know what I mean? Like for Iron Fist, going back to him again, I thought Finn Jones was a terrible choice to play Iron Fist.
Yeah, because he had been presented as being Asian American in the comics, if I remember correctly.
Actually, no, I think he was white in the comics.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, but at the same time, like, if they had cast an Asian person to play Danny Rand, I would have no problems about it. But I think some people would.
Yeah.
But I don't think those same people would speak out because it makes them sound racist.
Yeah, essentially.
So, like, yeah, you're right. There's like a no-win situation here. I'm of the mind that I don't care what color skin the actor is. I just want a good film with good acting.
Yeah.
I'm minority, so I do get offended by certain films. Like, remember, what was it? Who was it that played the Japanese dude in was it Breakfast at Tiffany's?
Oh, that was Mickey Rooney.
Mickey Rooney. I almost said Mickey Rourke.
Yeah.
I was like, no, I was like, yeah. So that stuff is offensive as hell.
Oh yeah, that was a flat out racist caricature that, you know, if it were made today, the film would. Well, I don't think it would even make release.
No, it wouldn't have been released at all. But I just don't know where you draw the line.
Yeah, it's one of those really hard judgment calls to make.
That's my biggest issue. Where do you draw the line? Like, at what point does a minority actor playing a white person role make it okay, and what point does a white person playing a minority role make it not okay? The popular argument is that they can't find minority actors who are good, but to me, you're just not looking hard enough.
Yeah, or you're like
the guys you sign from, or the guys and girls you sign from Asia are huge stars in Asia, but they're not stars because they're good actors. Some of them are stars because they're former models or singers.
Yeah.
Like, I remember watching The Green Hornet with Seth Rogen, and they cast Jay Chou as Kato.
Yep.
And Jay Chou, he's not an actor by trade, he's a musician. And I remember hearing him get cast, and I said to myself, like, really? Like, you couldn't find anyone else better? You couldn't find...
Like a proper martial artist?
You couldn't find anyone in the US who didn't have to learn the lines in a foreign language and make it sound awkward when he says them.
Yeah.
And you couldn't really find anyone else that could have better chemistry with Seth Rogen. Like, I find that so hard to believe. That's my main gripe. I don't care if you cast a minority actor in a white role or a white person in a minority role.
You have to question, too, like, when does the discussion about the casting or the final decision happen? Like, it's one thing for a bunch of Asian Americans to come in for auditions and to make it to a short list, and maybe the filmmaker really likes them, but then, especially in the case of like the bigger budget ones where there's so much more riding on it, they take it to the studio boss, and then the studio boss is like, well, no, we can't go with that person that you like because it's not going to pull in as much money.
Okay, I do take it back. I do care, but I don't think there was the same sort of outcry when Idris Elba was cast in Dark Tower.
No, that's true.
I do care in the sense that I think a lot of good minority actors may not be first choice for a lot of good films. Like John Cho, I think, is a really good actor who doesn't get a lot of good roles.
Yeah.
Because the people who write movies with white actors in mind, because white actors or actors in Hollywood are predominantly white.
Yeah, or the big stars.
I think it's a systemic problem that isn't just like the casting process. But it's such a like a difficult issue. Like, there's so many sides to it. I like props to Ed Skrein for doing it, and I hope he finds other work soon.
Oh yeah, I don't think Ed Skrein will have any trouble. I mean, his career's on the rise, and if anything, this will put his name in more people's heads for being a guy with a position.
Yep.
Yeah, props to him for kind of negotiating this thing and coming out of it probably seeming like the cleanest.
Actually, he's the only one that comes out looking like a hero.
Yeah, so that's pretty great. But also in the world of casting and in the kind of comic book world, we have to talk a little bit about the Joker movies, plural.
All right. It's plural?
It's plural, yep. You would not be alone in being confused by this situation, because I think what happened first was DC came out and they said, hey, we're working on a Joker origin film that is going to be produced by Martin Scorsese, probably going to borrow quite a bit from The Killing Joke, which is probably the seminal Batman comic that gets into Joker's backstory. I don't know if they specifically name-checked The Killing Joke itself, but most people out there think to themselves, oh, well, you know, if there's going to be a comic that they're going to draw from, it'll be that. So people were like weirded out by that to start. But like, where did you stand when you heard about that?
Okay, first of all, it's a terrible idea to make a Joker movie.
Yeah, because you're missing the kind of basic conflict of the whole thing.
Yeah, second of all, the fact that it's not Jared Leto, even though I despise Jared Leto's performance as the Joker, makes no sense to me either.
Yeah.
So this is a spin-off, but also a standalone, but also a franchise. My second issue with like the Joker is he's a very, very hard character to do. I'm of the mind that The Killing Joke cannot be adapted into a feature film because it is just far too grotesque.
Yeah, it would be to do it right, it would be a hard R kind of project that would be hard to sell to mainstream audiences.
It'd be a very difficult film to do, in my opinion, because I think the source material is just too dark.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can stray away from the source material or change anything. Yeah. Because the source material is known for being like a critical point in the Batman comic history, both in terms of what happens in the story and the sort of reaction it got afterwards.
So if anything, like I would say if they borrowed from Killing Joke at all, they would just be the barest kind of outline of the fact that like maybe the guy who becomes the Joker used to be a stand-up comic and that career was failing, and then he has that kind of classic really bad day where he's looped into a robbery that goes wrong, and then he falls into the vat of chemicals and blames Batman for his transformation and all that. I think that would probably be the limit of it in terms of source material.
I can't believe this is an actual idea that like went through I don't know how many stages of meetings and whatnot. And
well, it seems like they're kind of they're a bit star dazzled right now. They're like, oh, we're getting the guy from The Hangover to direct, and we're going to get Marty to be the producer, and it's going to be great.
Wait, Todd Phillips is directing?
Yeah.
What has he done since The Hangover?
I don't know, but I think he had at least one movie in between. But yeah, this is his next project. So there's so many competing things on the go here. Like
The Hangover 2 and 3 were like two of the worst sequels I've ever seen.
If he's not working with a really A-list script, then it's going to be pretty terrible. And you know that, being DC, they have a bad habit of like completely changing the thing in reshoots if it gets bad audience test scores. So it could be a complete nightmare. And adding on top of it all is the fact that it's not like they're firing Jared Leto. Like Jared Leto is going to be back in Suicide Squad 2, and he's going to appear in a Joker and Harley Quinn spin-off film that retraces more of the origins of their romance and acts as like a domestic abuse narrative, essentially. Like,
this sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah. So they're going to have two actors playing the Joker at the same time, which is going to be all kinds of confusing for casual viewers who, probably rightfully so, assume that when a person is chosen to play a big role like this, it's only going to be one person at a time. I really don't know why they're going this way when what the DC universe really needs is some stability and like a guiding kind of through line to just kind of let's get it going. Let's stop miring ourselves in weird backroom stuff.
And don't you think DC's kind of like going in this like too quickly? Like, shouldn't they wait to see how Justice League does?
You would think. Yeah.
I get the hurry. I know they want to make money and all sorts of stuff. I just don't understand why they couldn't think of something better.
And they're also setting themselves up for a world of hurt, apparently, because I think it's the first solo hero film that we're going to see after Justice League is going to be the Flash movie, and it's going to be drawing from Flashpoint, which is a comic arc that by its very nature includes all kinds of time travel and confusing rewriting of plot lines. And it's one of those comics that has completely divided the fan base because it sets things up one way and then completely tears them apart and splits things off into alternate universes. So it's another recipe for confusion and weird storytelling.
That's kind of like what X-Men Apocalypse was to me. Or, sorry, not X-Men Apocalypse, Days of Future Past. Like, it was a very entertaining comic book movie, but it also, like, just opened up a whole can of worms and allows the studios to just be like, oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, that timeline doesn't count. Here we go, new one.
I mean, if you were to try to poll like the whole audience who saw the X-Men movies and try to get a sense of like how effective do you think this was, I don't know what kind of results you would get. Like how deeply people care about this. Is it just the fans who get really riled up about this, or are people legitimately confused? I don't know.
I hope it never gets made, just like the Lord of the Flies remake that they're doing with an all-female cast.
Oh yes, good transition. Yeah, this have you been tracking this since the news broke a day or two ago?
I've been tracking it so much as like I saw the headline, read kind of like the main body article, and clicked X as fast as I could.
Yeah, you were like, this is
stupid.
aberration.
Yeah, this is stupid.
Yeah.
I don't want to learn anymore. I hope it never gets made. I loved the book as a kid. I thought the black and white movie was quite good. I just don't see why it's necessary. Kind of like how I didn't see Ghostbusters with an all-female cast was necessary.
Yeah, well, this kind of gets back to, I think, what you said many episodes ago. Like, it's firmly in the territory of pandering, where they're saying, like,
yes,
here's the thing that you're familiar with. We're not going to write something original or in keeping with the kind of conflicts that girls would experience. We're just going to take a male story and flip the gender on it and wipe our hands of it and call it a day.
Yeah, that's so stupid, man.
And I think people have very rightly pointed out, like, you do a deep reading of the novel and you see that a lot of what drives the story is rooted in, like, that kind of male tendency to aggression, you know, that biological thing that
yes,
guys are maybe more likely to go for, like, a physical aggression as a solution to a problem, whereas women may be more likely to do like the emotional version of that.
Sure.
Would we even get like two splintering factions on a desert island where they, you know, would that even happen? Or would, you know, it doesn't seem like a recipe for.
Well, I guess it'd be like an R-rated version of Mean Girls, but on an island.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. There's been a few people memeing about that online.
Yeah, but I don't understand why it has to be Lord of the Flies.
I mean, name recognition is probably the most logical reason.
Like,
but
are we gonna have like 50 years down the road a film franchise about Harriet Potter and like, and I don't know, like Rebecca Weasley and I don't know, freaking like Harold Granger or something like that? You know, like, this is so stupid. Like you honestly can't come up with something any better.
And surely there are other works of classic literature that have a predominantly female base of characters that would make for an equally as interesting adaptation.
And I don't feel like this kind of stuff empowers females. I don't know. I just don't feel like it does. Because when you want something that's like uniquely your own.
Yeah. And it doesn't help either that the thing is being written by a couple of guys, which, you know, a lot of people don't like.
Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster too.
You can already kind of cast your mind forward to some of the possible things that we might see. Like, are they going to like age up the characters just enough to make them like hitting puberty so that they can have a few scantily clad scenes in there to really titillate the young boys in the audience? Like.
That would be the worst idea.
Like, ever. But it could happen. It could totally happen.
Might as well just be Baywatch.
Because we're dealing with a major studio who's doing this. This isn't some like indie production where they were decided to be all like reverse progressive or something. This is Warner Brothers we're dealing with.
Right.
So
fair.
The studio head could very easily kind of take a look at it and be like, needs a little bit more sex.
In that voice, especially.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I wouldn't be doing it if we hadn't seen so many examples of it in the past. And
right. Okay. Fair point.
In other productions, you know. But yeah, it's pretty much a walking nightmare right now. But it's it's Warner Brothers. Would they really turn away and not make it at this point? Like, it's kind of a foregone conclusion if they've hired some guys.
If the backlash is like strong enough, if there's enough, I honestly think they'll scrap the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. I honestly think that public perception is such a real thing these days that movies are so afraid of pissing people off that they're willing to be super politically correct and just say, you know what, sorry guys, we're just not going to do this film. Because I think the consequences are too great and too significant to ignore now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, but it totally depends on who's...
Because social media is such like a huge thing now, right?
True, but it totally depends, I think, on the creators. Like, we look at the HBO Confederacy show, like the guys from Game of Thrones are doing that, and they are too, like, they're kind of the auteurs of TV right now, and they've kind of said to themselves, you know, no, there's artistic value in this show. We're going to press forward and make this no matter how many accusations of racism we get. I'm
willing to give them the benefit of the doubt on that one, actually, to be honest.
I'm not against it myself. I mean, I'd have to see something in it before I'd be willing to make any advanced judgments, but just taking that as a counterexample to, like, is Warner Brothers the kind of company that, you know, being a larger corporation, are they going to bow to the criticism before, like a smaller production by like a cable channel that has its core user base, you know?
Mm-hmm. I think they should bow, and I think they will bow. I just don't understand how this is a good idea at all. I think based on the premise of the film, it's going to lose money no matter what you do with it, no matter who you cast in it. And if Warner Brothers can't see that, then we really have a much bigger problem in the industry than we realize. Like, you honestly can't be that tone deaf. Did we not learn anything from the female Ghostbusters? Granted, I haven't seen it, and, you know, like, maybe it's good, maybe it's not. I don't care. I just thought it was an unnecessary film, much like this one. But have we not learned anything? Like,
no, I don't think lessons are that easily learned, because what a lot of people say is you're never going to truly dissuade a production company from doing something unless you don't go to see it. And unfortunately, conflicts like these have a way of, like, you know, self-perpetuating, because people are like, oh, I know that movie, I'm just going to go check it out for kicks.
But that's a very real concern right now. I don't understand how you don't see it.
That's troubling, though. But maybe on like a sunnier note, we could talk about Logan Lucky, because I think both of us really like that.
Which is a movie that I think we needed, but apparently the studios are like, nope, sorry, can't do this kind of stuff too often.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because I think this is a movie that pretty much stands up as an example of like one filmmaker who got fed up with what the industry was doing and was looking around at the environment that breeds female Lord of the Flies remakes and breeds confusing character casting and stuff. And he kind of said, no, I'm going to take my toys and I'm going to leave for a while, and I'm going to make a TV show that's totally mine. And when I come back to movies, I'm going to make something that plays to all my strengths and allows actors to have a lot of fun and people can just, you know, lose themselves in.
It was a very fun movie. I don't think it was perfect. I definitely enjoyed it. I ended up giving it like 3 stars out of 4 or 4 out of 5 or whatever system you want to use. What didn't you like about it? The first thing that came to my mind was the pacing. I didn't like the pacing.
Yeah, I think we were trading texts after you saw it, and both of us kind of agreed on the idea that it could have been snappier. Like maybe if it shed 15 minutes of runtime, or
just cut out like stuff like Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah, he was not a
who I thought
character.
Was like so out of place. It feels like he didn't belong at all.
It was almost like Seth MacFarlane's character was the product of like him auditioning for another role, and then Soderbergh was like, oh well, we can't really use you for any of the roles we've written, but like let's find something for you in here.
Maybe he has a really convincing Southern accent. But I don't feel like his character really added much to the plot. Like it did, but at the same time, I just feel like...
Because all he really existed to do was be a bit of a commentary on like the rich financiers of the stock car world, and then, you know, he has a bit of a role in the way things unravel once the heist has been completed.
Right, and even then, I feel like you could explain it without him, you know, having been in the final investigation, right?
What did you make of the ending with Hilary Swank? Like, did you interpret that as her basically like going undercover and trying to finally prove that the Logans did it?
Yeah, that's totally what she does. And I thought, when I first saw the ending, I was kind of like, oh, this sucks. He didn't get away with it. But at the same time, it made so much more sense to have her in it, because the movie is called Logan Lucky.
Yeah.
And it's about this Logan family that's had notoriously bad luck throughout their entire lives. Every time something good happens, they take 2 steps back because of something. And I thought that was a very poignant scene to have her work undercover in the final scene, because it's juxtaposed with them partying and drinking in the bar and having a good time. So it's very fitting.
Yeah, it was kind of like it was a reminder that it's a kind of classic Hollywood thing of reminding you that crime doesn't pay and that there's going to be a comeuppance for people that break the law, which used to be a requirement in movies, but is now completely optional.
It just makes sense.
You see them enjoying the spoils of their heist, and, you know, I don't know. It's probably not going to happen, but I would love to see a sequel where like they were on the run again, and or they're trying to pull off.
This movie's losing money.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean,
it's gonna lose money, isn't it? Like it's $29 million budget, 20 million marketing.
No, I don't think they spent 20 on marketing, did they?
That's what it said. Estimated 20 million.
Oh, okay.
And it's grossed what, 16, 17 million so far?
Has it opened in any English-speaking territories outside the US and Canada yet? I mean, not that it's going to make a lot in Australia and the UK, but...
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I still don't think it's going to have that much of an impact on its bottom line. But again, like, this is the type of movie that Hollywood should focus on. And it's too bad it didn't do well at the box office, because this is just more reason for Hollywood bigwigs to shy away from films like this.
Exactly, yeah, because they like, you know, it's a fresh story, and then Soderbergh, you know, as I was talking about in the last episode, he came at the marketing with a different strategy compared to what you normally do for movies of this size and budget.
He distributed it himself.
Exactly, but like his media buy for ads and trailers was way, way less than what you normally spend for a movie of this size. Like on a 40 million picture or a 30 million picture, you'd often spend about 40 million and have a major studio distribute it. And you'd see a lot more trailers, a lot more TV spots. So, you know, when people were initially talking about that strategy, it was kind of suggested like, if this works, this could change the business. But maybe it didn't work. Like maybe you need that kind of big studio push with like a lot of trailers and TV spots just to get it in front of as many eyeballs as possible and get them out to the theater.
I had heard that they had spent pretty much all of their marketing budget in like the 2 weeks leading up to the film and nothing before that.
Right.
And so they were, because they couldn't compete, and it made more sense to do this like really big 2-week media blitz and hope that word of mouth gets it going. It is a good film. If you get a chance to see it, I think people should. I feel bad for Soderbergh, and his 2 next projects I think are going to be made for TV, aren't they?
I mean, it almost seems like Soderbergh would be a better fit for like the Netflixes of the world or the Amazons of the world, where you have a distribution system already in place.
Yeah,
you don't
totally
have to worry about competing with the other marquee films that are coming out on a given weekend.
What's happened is that like that sort of like mid-budget movie has moved to TV. So in theaters, you either get like the big blockbusters, or you just get like the indie film that somehow made it to your local theater, you know?
And like Amazon and Netflix can definitely afford it. Like they spent $90 million on the new Will Smith, David Ayer thing.
What's that one?
It's called Bright. It comes out in like early December, I think. And
I have not heard of this. What is this?
Okay, well, first let's play a clip.
That's a magic wand. This is like a nuclear weapon that grants wishes.
That's whatever you want. You want to be taller or shorter? You want $10 million?
You're not stealing that wand.
Some days I close my eyes and fade away.
You gotta get out of this neighborhood.
That's just the dark side of me.
They're gonna kill you, then me. And that's when the stupid shit's gonna start.
And from that clip, you'll probably realize that this is a story about Will Smith playing a cop in a kind of...
In playing basketball in West Philadelphia?
No.
Born and raised?
He plays a cop in sort of a alternate universe version of Earth where the humans and fantasy fairy creatures coexist like separate races. And he's paired with a orc partner to be riding around in a patrol car with him. The orc is played by Kyle Edgerton, wearing a whole bunch of prosthetic makeup. And essentially there's a plot involving a missing magic wand that has like all the power of a nuclear weapon and a bunch of gangs who all want it. And it's supposed to be a not very well disguised commentary on race relations in the US. Yeah, it cost, because of the effects involved, it cost $90 million to make, and Netflix fronted the cash, and they're going to have a exclusive Will Smith movie that will only be on Netflix in the next couple months.
Although, to be fair, like a movie like that, 90 million, that doesn't seem like a lot these days, eh? And with Netflix, it feels like the advertising is kind of like built in.
Exactly, yeah, because they can do those, like, depending on how you watch Netflix, like, oftentimes there's a big takeover block when you first log in that kind of shows you some big marquee title that's coming up in the near future.
Yeah.
And that's kind of that's a great built-in way to draw awareness to it without having to, like, they still buy billboards and they play trailers and stuff and everything, but it doesn't seem to have the same the same size and scale as like a Hollywood production.
Right.
But yeah, we'll see if that works for them, because people are already kind of making fun of the concept, and it kind of felt like a weird thing for Will Smith to want to work on. Like maybe he just really likes working with David Ayer after Suicide Squad.
Maybe.
Yeah. We'll see what comes of that. It could be a very weird December thing to experience in competition with Star Wars and all of those fluffy porgs.
Right. I will say one thing about Logan Lucky, and it's that like I've been a huge Channing Tatum fan for a while now. I think he's a really underrated actor, and I thought he was really good. The other one's Riley Keough, who I'm also a big fan of, and she did a TV series called The Girlfriend Experience, where she plays a very like tough female character, and that was Steven Soderbergh. And she's now been in quite a few of his stuff. I think she was even in Magic Mike at one point in like a really minor role. I could be totally wrong, but yeah, she was really good. Daniel Craig was quite good. My one of my other gripes about Logan Lucky was that it's a redneck Ocean's 11, and I think that's a really good way to describe it. But the pieces don't fall in place as well as it does in Ocean's 11.
The classic heist movie resolution where you see how they actually pulled it off.
Yeah, it's either like poorly thought out or it happens too quick.
Yeah, I almost think there was too much dead air between the end of the heist and the actual revelation. It almost seems like Soderbergh is going in a direction where he's suggesting that...
A little bit.
He's suggesting that Channing Tatum's character did give up all the money and that, you know, he hung all of his partners out to dry. Mm-hmm. And it kind of goes down that road for surprisingly long. And then it's like, oh no, here's how it all actually happened.
So he tries to kind of pull the rug out from the audience as well as the characters in the movie. And the first part, I don't think worked as well as it could have.
But all that being said, if you haven't seen Logan Lucky, we both highly recommend it. It's a great way to kind of close out an otherwise lackluster late summer movie season.
My review's up.
Yeah, and Jason's review is up on kinetoscope.ca if you want to take a look at that. So yeah, that about wraps things up. Head on over to kinetoscope.ca for that review and for some of our upcoming coverage of the Toronto International Film Festival, which I'll be attending and seeing way too many movies in too short a period of time. Definitely not healthy.
I saw your schedule, you dork.
But until then, my name is Robert Snow in Toronto.
And my name is Jason Chen from Vancouver. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.